Okay, I think I resolved the back EMF issue on my virtual rotation mechanisms here. Avoid the mess like always. Okay, I don't have the final part hooked up yet, but I resolved the main thing. These two aren't used. They're just for later, for another project. These four are. Okay. Each of these have diodes feeding these. So there's one-way current going through these. It's not switching polarity anymore. It's one-way current. Okay. One's going peak. When this one starts going down, this one goes peak. When this one starts going down, this one goes peak. And when this one starts going down, this one goes peak. And when this one starts going down, this one goes peak. And it revolves around. Okay. So basically we're getting the roll off from peak to zero just about for free, because that's the magnetic field collapsing without us switching the polarity, so we get the induction from it. Now, they come to the outputs. Okay, here's my outputs. Now I have all my grounds tied together to one ground wire, which goes back to the ground which is shared between the driving circuit and the power, and to the ground of the electromagnets go back there too. Okay. Now, when I increase frequency, right, of this pulsing going around, it barely, if any, lowers the input like back EMF, because you're not switching polarity. Okay, you're using the same polarity, and I think this is key. So right now I'm at 60 hertz, and I'm at 1.2. I'm not looking at hundredths of an amp because all my parameters aren't perfect. I'm gonna have to have those dialed in to have it perfect, and all the resistance perfect in this to keep it. But anyway, let's go to, remember, 1.2, 160. That's 100 extra hertz, 160 hertz. 1.2. I just increased it 100 hertz, and the input amperage does not change. It's still keeping up. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for to resolve that back EMF. And the one-way current, I think, is key with the diodes. Now we are going to get a little leakage through it, and these dials probably aren't exactly the same at the moment. But anyway, here's my output. Now the yellow is the output because they're step-down transformers, and I'm just looking at one output. Okay, so I'm looking at one of the input phases, okay, and I'm looking at the output. And as you see, we're 90 degrees out of phase. The yellow is on the left of the blue. Now let's move it over one to the second coil. Second coil, in phase. So the yellow just moved to the right. The next one, now the yellow's on the right, 90 degrees. The yellow just moved to the right again. And last phase, now 180 degrees out of phase. The yellow just moved to the right again. So each step, it moves to the right and it rotates, right? And as you see, even though I'm using one-way current in, positive pulse, positive pulse, positive pulse, positive pulse, my output is full alternating current, two polarities, because induction don't care what polarity you're at. It just cares what direction the current's going, growing or shrinking. That's all it cares about. So this, you harvest the shrinking without flipping polarity. Now that we established this back EMF issue that I was having, and I think we resolved that, now I could work on taking these four phases that aren't shrinking the input when I raise for frequency, and get them to rotate with 90-degree phases, and it shouldn't kill the input when I do it. Now here's the other interesting thing. I've seen this many times before. Input 1.2 amps. Now the current, I have the ground wires going through a multimeter, 2.3 amps coming out of these coils. These coils are putting out 2.3 amps into the ground, and the supply is only putting in 1.2 amps. I've seen this before with my Clement Figuera setups, and I have some videos on my channel that talk about that and try to evaluate that. But I think this is a big factor in what you want to see if you're getting close, that your current going back into the coils is much greater, close to double, than the current going into the circuit. Because in my mind, this means one thing, that the current is looping twice. Instead of going back into ground, the current is going through one transformer or two transformers, whatever it is, back, and the EMF of these goes in series with the input out the positive and back around. So the extra current in these circuits is happening, and it's being able to be utilized for our gain in the long run. So that's my prediction, why I think this is very important, where you need to see close to double the current on the ground out of the coils than the current you're putting in. Then it's reutilizing that current again and adding that back EMF to it. So now that I'm pretty happy with this setup, I'm going to get all these wires permanent and clean it up. And then I'm going to continue with my output phases now. 4 output phases, 90 degrees out of phase. Right, 90, 0, 90, 180, 270, and back to 0. And that'll rotate if you put them in the right configuration now. And I'm hoping when I load them, it continues with no back EMF lowering that input when I increase frequency. Because the goal is to decouple the output that I take from it, the induced voltage, current, and power that I draw from it, right, decouples with the input. The input always stays that same. And I could increase the frequency to increase the power output without drawing any more power in. That is the ultimate goal. So this is looking very good. Join the forum in the description and watch the progress.